everybody, welcome to our third podcast in our natural selection unit. Tonight we'll be taking a look at different lines of evolutionary thought. So without further ado, let's get rolling. Okay, so there are different forms of evidence we have to support that the ways in which natural selection has influenced evolution over time. And so just want to take a peek at some of these. The big one, because that seems to be our most physical evidence that we have of life existing a really long time ago, is indeed the fossil record. So this is sort of the imprint, if you will, that living organisms have left over time. So I know you guys are aware of fossils. You might have seen dinosaur skeletons and so on. So fossils could be just imprints in rock. They, are no longer any organic matter. It's basically all mineralized, basically into rock at this point. So that is, what we have to really look at things past. And we estimate their date based on radiometric dating. This is a way where we can make a guess, if you will, as to how old something is based on the carbon that's left. Just like many elements, over time, the carbon that's there breaks down. It has what we call a half-life, and the radioactive isotopes that are there will break down, no longer be carbon. So based on how much of the isotope is there, we can gauge the time frame that existed, because we know the length of the half-life. So in a newly formed rock, the isotope that's there over time will go after its half-life. You'll have only a certain amount of it left, and so on and so on and so on, and we can actually date from what that initial isotope was. It's not real exact. You get some pretty wide ranges when you use this. So we have our best estimates right now, and perhaps, who knows, in the future, maybe we'll be able to, isolate it a little bit more. There's also the idea of plate tectonic theory that we can use to estimate the age of something, because we know that the plates of the earth, our land, is shifting. So based on when it shifts, how long it's been there, what's available, we may, actually have the ability to look at organisms, and perhaps estimate how long they've been around. I'm sure you've heard of Pangea, and that's when we had a one single landmass, and over time it has actually separated, so that we now have the continents that we have. It makes a little bit of sense, not gonna lie. You look at it, it does kind of look like a puzzle that's there, and there is some time frame estimate that the earth had, that we used to be there, going all the way back to basically 400 million years ago. Plates are moving. That's what made all of our mountain ranges. So the Himalayas were formed because of that driving. And as the plates hit, they drove them upward like this. And in essence, actually, Mount Everest is actually still growing. We also have the idea of morphological divergence, okay? And this idea that organisms stem from what we call a common ancestor, okay? And with that common ancestor, what we have, we might have had this common ancestor here, and through some sort of event, split the population, okay, and now we have population X and population Y that are now so different because of separation for whatever reason, and became two species. All right, so that's what it is. We have our common ancestor back here we have now a new species over here, and so many scientists go off the fact that we can track that based on a number of different reasons. So that's, and morphological, just in case, just for those that need the refresher, that just means that's structural. Okay, when we talk about morphology, we're talking about their structure. So let's talk a little bit about structure, okay, because we have types of structures we refer to as being homologous, and we have types of structures which we refer to as being analogous. So we really got to make sure we understand the difference there. Here are some structures that we would refer to you know, as having similar structure. We call these all homologous structures. And by homologous, all I'm saying is that with that term implies a common ancestor component, that there is some sort of evolutionary tie to it. And you can see here the bat's wing and the human arm are very, very similar right here. And there's my human. Okay, so however, even though you have a bat wing here, right? So here's my bat, and here is a puffin. Puffins are neat little birds. They're actually kind of pretty. And both of them use these for the same reason. They both use their wings for flight. Okay, however, a bird wing and a bat wing are not homologous. They are analogous. And what that means is they have the same function, but they don't imply the same ancestral background that, say, the bat wing and ours do. We are homologous, okay? These guys are analogous, okay? So here's where we can look at the idea of convergence versus divergence. Convergence means that some sort of natural selection or evolutionary event caused organisms to evolve or select for traits that were similar to one another, whereas divergence actually took them apart or took them away from one another. So let's talk a little bit about human versus a chimp. Here's divergence, okay, where we came, and so as fossil record states that we show a common ancestor between both of us, but at some moment in time, whatever that common ancestor primate or primate-ish thing was, okay, that population was separated, and we went in one route, eventually leading to us. Chimps went in another route, leading to the modern day chimp that we know now, okay? So whatever our common ancestor was, that's where it came from. And that's a divergent piece, because we had our common ancestor, okay, following a line, and then it split. And we've got humans over here and chimps over here. So they diverged. They went different ways. Convergence, though, again, would be having, you know, some sort of selection force pushing organisms to the same place. And we can look at this from a shark and a dolphin. Okay, two very distinctive animals. Shark is part of the fish group, and they are part of that class of vertebrate animals. Dolphins are part of the mammalian class of vertebrate animals. Okay, however, when you look at both of them, there are a huge number of morphological or structural characteristics that are very similar, from dorsal fins to their pectoral fins, you know, to certain aspects that make them very similar. However, from an evolutionary standpoint, they are not so similar at all. Okay, dolphins are much, much more closely related to mammals, and are in fact a mammal, than are sharks. Okay, so that would be a convergent evolutionary event. In evolution, we can look at the genes that control development and see consistencies throughout life. A lot of the ways in which organisms develop are extraordinarily similar, and so that gives us some evidence to say that at some point, you know, we have all developed very similar methods of how we develop as embryos and eventually as little organisms. Then we have things now, and this is the big one, because this is, you know, I mean, talk about the new one getting in there and causing a whole lot of kerfuffle, is the biochemistry aspect of consistencies in living things. And that's the DNA and the protein piece. DNA is extraordinary, because that is the one thing that our parents give us, right? The one actual physical thing that our parents give us is their genes. So there's a lot of, you know, ideas out there that say, well, if that's the one thing that our parents give us, then we can really track similarities in DNA to look at relatedness. And in fact, that's what they're doing. Now that we can code genomes, this is huge, you know, now that we can code our genomes, we can look at those similarities in the genes to help us determine relatedness. And that's why, in some cases, the DNA piece is really sort of throwing classification on its head a little bit, because things that are sharing a lot of DNA, we didn't anticipate. Okay, and the same thing goes for proteins. We're using protein structure as well as a reason for evolutionary relatedness. Okay, because that goes back to genes. The more, you know, amino acid sequences you share, you know, and the more number of amino acids in a particular protein you share, that also goes back to the DNA. So this is a big piece of our evolutionary puzzle that we're really starting to figure out right now, is this biochemistry piece, which, you know, up until about, you know, 15 or so years ago, 15, 20 years, hadn't really been looked at very heavily. But since we've coded the genome of a boatload of species, it's really helped us kind of understand from a DNA perspective who might be more related to whom and so on. So for example, we have a few amino acid sequences here, and what you're seeing as far as what's in, you know, yellow are the ones that they share. So as it goes, you would say, all right, the more sequence orders you share, the more related you are, okay? So we can use that from the actual gene itself to the RNA transcripts it produces, because don't forget about RNA transcript processing. And that plays kind of a big role in our ability to produce proteins, all the way to the protein actual amino acid sequence. And within this, we have the idea of conserved sequences, right? So something that would be that big of a deal would be something we would see in multitudes of organisms, and we would see it in that particular sequence and in that order. However, I bring with this the caveat that we have to remember that these types of ways that we and pieces of evidence that we use to try to explain how change has occurred over time is built off of a number of basically a number of assumptions and a huge amount of interpretation. We are interpreting pieces of evidence, and anytime you try to piece together something that is time related, you know, and you're trying to piece together something from a time that, you know, we don't have record of, we don't have written descriptions of what it was, we don't have pictures of what it was like, we don't have evidence or eyewitness accounts, it makes it really hard. So we use what we have, we base it off of as much as we can do at the time that we have it. And the one thing about this I will say is that, especially with the DNA piece, is that a number of original ideas are being challenged. It's nice to see that as new evidence is found, that we can promote, you know, trying to find out as much as we can. So there's a lot of assumptions going on here, and still a whole lot of questions to be answered. I know even from my perspective, I have a ton of questions that I would like answered in all of this. You know, for example, you know, we see the effects that sort of bad mutations have in a population, but we don't really have any evidence supporting a beneficial mutation. You know, and that's really, really hard to kind of grab onto. So there's a few things I know that I have for questions. I hope that you know, you guys maybe come up with some of your own questions that you might have. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. And we're going to move from here to be looking at what happens when we mess around with the gene pool a little bit, and when an event occurs to select one particular allele over another. So we're going to move from this into allele frequencies. So take it easy and have a great night, and we'll talk to you guys later.